With this said, I'm very happy that we're already stepping into the next session. The next session is the new inequalities. Is this the business of business? Question mark. The two experts that are going to have this conversation this time is Marie Ringler. She's leading the work of Ashoka in Europe and also is a member of their global leadership group. So Ashoka, I'm sure most of you know it already, is an international organization and network that promotes social entrepreneurship all over the world. And Marie's work really evolves around promoting and supporting Ashoka's work in 26 country offices. And Ashoka's working together with 570 social entrepreneurs, probably more and more each day. This started 10 years ago when Marie opened up the Austrian office in 2011. She's also quite familiar with the business context, as she herself went to business school and holds a degree from ESAD at the University of St. Gallen. She's also currently the vice president and the member of the board at the European Forum Alpbach. And Markus Scholz, you have already met at the very beginning, is the head of the Institute for Business Ethics and Sustainability Strategy at the University of Applied Sciences for Management and Communication. Marie and Markus, we're handing over to you. Marie, the floor is yours.
Marie, can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good.
I'm here.
Marie, it's very good to have you here. I know that we are both in Vienna. I know it's very hot outside, and I think we've got a maybe an even hotter discussion today. Let me just dive into it. So the theme of our conference is radical change or more of the same. You being at Ashoka, one of, I think, the most prestigious institutions that tries to enable change through, maybe I put it that way, social entrepreneurship. Do you think you enabled radical change, or are you just doing more of the same?
Well, I would definitely, I should lose my job if I was doing more of the same. I should really be fired. But, let me put this into context. What are social entrepreneurs? Social entrepreneurs are people who have an entrepreneurial mindset and drive big scale systems change in the world for the good of all. So these are not entrepreneurs who are, greenwashing their enterprise a little bit to make it look a bit more sexy and a bit more, nice. These are truly people who have changing the world at the center of everything that they do. And in the context of Ashoka and our sort of ways of looking at social entrepreneurs, we also don't really care whether people know how to read a balance sheet if they come into our network. We care about their ability and big vision to create large-scale systemic change. And the impact numbers of the social entrepreneurs we work with across the world in 92 countries, almost 4,000 of them, actually show that they do. Almost 90% of them change public policy, which is a huge key part of systems change. And we can talk more about some of the examples. So if I was just doing more of the same, or if that ever happens, please tell me and I should be fired.
I think you shouldn't be fired, not at all. And I think Ashoka is a great organization, but still help me to understand that better. When you think of radical change, what comes to your mind first? And let me elaborate a little bit. But if I think of radical change, I don't think about choosing or looking for the win-win case in every situation that is out there. I mean, I understand. I teach business ethics and sustainability. I work with businesses, and of course, it's easy to communicate to business. Well, look, if you're engaged in sustainable business, there's a win for you. Very often, this is only an incremental win. So this is not about looking for the maybe for a revolution or for a radical change, but it's about looking for incremental changes. So what is different that you do with Ashoka, rather than looking for the incremental change?
Absolutely. Let me maybe give you an example, one that is connected to the issue of climate crisis that was already at the forefront of many of our speakers. One of the true visionaries of the renewable energy changes that have happened in Germany and across Europe in the last decades is a woman called Ursula Slavic. And most of you have probably never heard of her. She's amazing. She's now in her 70s and, you know, continues strong. But she came into the work when she realized that we were facing this crisis many decades ago. She really saw this early, and that we needed to rethink the way that we produce energy, that we needed to shift power within that system, and that we needed to make sure that any type of energy production would have our, you know, as our citizens, would have citizens at the center and would have the interest of citizens at the center and not for-profit interests. And so what she created really was the movement of citizen-owned power plants. And most of you are probably aware that nowadays this is normal. You know, you can own a share in one of the power plants of the city of Vienna, for example, and you can own shares in your local solar, you know, energy-powered production system. And that's what she pioneered. And then that way, what she did is not only did she show it's possible in her case that a small village can become the owners of energy production for themselves, but that we can shift the power structure within that entire system from big corporations or states that own and produce this power to citizens, to ourselves. And that's what I would call radical change. And now it looks normal, which is the greatest thing, because that's what successful systems change looks like.
Thank you very much. I mean, that is very illustrative. It's both, I guess, the product, but it's also a way of thinking about producing energy. And maybe the radical change is actually the political answer of how we consume our electricity, and if we own it or if we just buy it from somebody. Thank you, Marie. When Marie and I were discussing this session before the actual session last, I think Thursday, I was looking into the title again. And I said, okay, what would she mean with new inequalities? And she's titled her talk, "The New Inequalities, Is This the Business of Business?" So, Marie, help us to understand, what are the new inequalities that you see out there? Where do they come from? What are they? Who causes them?
Well, I mean, there are sort of very obvious inequalities that all of us, you know, see every day if we walk through the world with open eyes, and they relate to, you know, inequalities of access to wealth, poverty, inequalities relating to gender, sexual orientation, race. All of those inequalities are quite apparent. And I think we've come to understand that we have to tackle them, and that we need to, you know, find new ways of addressing them. But the inequalities that I think are more hidden and maybe less visible are connected to the question of who gets to decide what solutions we bring for those inequalities. And what I mean by that is to build on the example of Ursula Slavic and the citizens' power plants. When we think about how in our world we make decisions, how we take decisions, we're still you know, operating within a relatively Fordist model of society, right? We have assigned roles. We have politicians who we elect to make decisions for us. We have scientists to help those politicians make better decisions. We have doctors and nurses who are supposed to take care of my health. There are teachers who are supposed to make sure that kids have good education. Now, this is, you know, a pretty Fordist model, right? Because it sort of assigns very clear roles and descriptions and responsibilities to each of us. But it's also, in a way, disempowering, right? Because what does it say about me as a citizen, my ability to be part of big political change? How does, you know, when I delegate my personal health to a doctor and a nurse, how does it empower or disempower me, you know, as the care for myself and my own health? So can we be, you know, flipping sort of a switch here and thinking about a different type of a different way of thinking about how decisions are made. Because in this Fordist model, it's the politicians that make decisions for us and we get to vote for them, right? Now, think of the new Green Deal the European Commission announced, and that certainly is a major milestone in addressing the climate crisis. But we have to ask the question of how are we as citizens, how we as scientists, as business leaders, as, you know, in all our different roles that we have in our societies, as parents, as uncles, as people, you know, leading our communities, how do we get to be part of this new Green Deal? And how do we make decisions within this new Green Deal? Or is it still sort of the old paternalistic model where, you know, the guy that heads up the factory tells the person at the end of the line what to do? And so in my mind, you know, one of the key inequalities that we're facing is actually the question of who gets to decide and who gets, and this is very important, who has the skills to come up with new solutions that will really actually shift power and that will get us to better solutions, solutions that are not, you know, decided by, you know, a chosen few, or for this model of delegating responsibility.
Okay. Marie, that now sounds really radical. If I understand you correctly, you are challenging the division of labor arguments that we have, well, particular educated, particular well-functioned entities, persons in the society, doctors, nurses, scientists, managers for that matter, and they're specialized, and that's, you know, why we are producing so many goods and so good quality. I mean, that brought us here. At the same time, you seem to argue that this model is not bringing us any further, that it's not helping us to deal with these new inequalities. But at the end of the day, Marie, so if I think of, you know, telling that to managers in a business school and saying, well, we have to have these decisions bottom up rather than top down, that might create some problems of the understanding of, you know, managers in their function, but also, I mean, it's still a capitalistic society. So, you know, the people who own it.
Markus, don't managers also create problems for us sometimes?
I wouldn't say, I wouldn't say that. I'm just thinking how I would discuss that with managers in a business school. And then again, you have this setting that's, you know, it's still capitalism, and the people who have the money, they dictate us what to do. They dictate in companies what to do. Now you seem to argue for a bottom-up model. Is that the case? And how would you envision that in practice?
So I'm actually arguing for new ways, more fluid ways of solving our problems, right? I mean, of course, we can take this further and discuss, you know, are there new ways of rethinking democracy out there? And, you know, how do, you know, new, you know, visions of leadership, such as laid out by Frédéric Laloux, who I'm a big fan of, you know, how do they, you know, maybe also change the organizations that we live and work in? But I think what's at the core here is not only the governance models of our society and our institutions, it's also who has the skills to be part of these decisions. And how do we make sure that not only do we delegate making decisions to people, but that they also have everything that they need in order to make them well and to be driving those ideas and those solutions for the good of all. And to me, that's, you know, that's a key, distinction here, right? I'm not arguing, I'm arguing to say, in order to, you know, for us to be able to live in a world where solutions outrun our problems, we need everyone to take up their role as a change maker for the good of all, right? We need everyone to step into responsibility for jointly solving our problems. And unless we make sure everyone has that ability and that self-permission and permission by society, we're creating this huge gap of who gets to design solutions. And we end up with, you know, technological solutions that were invented by, you know, old-eyed men. who maybe don't serve, the needs of others, and so, we need to make sure that that our solutions reflect the diversity of the world, the diversity of needs, of experiences, and we can only do that if everyone can step into that change making.
Thank you, Marie. I think you're connecting very well to a few scholars here and also non-scholars at NBS. But along the way, I was thinking. So you were mentioning a few words that caught my attention. Solutions, good for all, success. So now we have everybody engaged in radical change, and maybe it's a multi-stakeholder model, maybe it's a bottom-up process, and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, we have to succeed, and by succeed, of course, there's the substantive, namely success. So how do we define success in your idea, in your world? How would you define success here?
I define my success when there's more and more people who step into their own power, into their own specific power, into their abilities, into whose potential is truly shines and flourishes in our society. That's how I define my success. But it's sort of the larger question of, how we define success shapes the way we think about society, right? And if you look at, models for systems change, you'll see that there's various levers that we can work on in order to change that system, and it's the input, it's the output, it's the roles, it's the resources, etc. But we often forget that how we define success is actually a key way of changing the way we think and we act. And what do I mean by that? When the women's movement, which of course, when the women's movement got many people to understand that women needed the right to vote, they defined success as the ability of women to take part in society in the same way as men. And that measure of success then led to many, many other legal changes in how we act, how we see our roles in society, how we think of gender equality, etc. So if we're able to say, we want everyone in our world to be able to contribute to society, to make change, to be part of, something that's bigger than yourself, then many other things will follow, because it begs the question of, how do we think of success in our education systems? And we all know that great systems don't actually work, right? I mean, they're a very sort of simplified way of saying something about people's talents and who they might become in the future. And so, but because they are the current measure of success, that's what everyone looks at. Instead, when we say a good or better measure of success is that everyone has these sort of abilities of, stepping into sort of somebody else's shoes, understanding what the other needs, which is sort of empathy, when people know how to identify a problem and solve it for the good of all, when they know how to bring others together and really teamwork around it, when that becomes the measure of success, our whole education systems and the way we think about success in growing up will radically change. And that will lead to very different business leaders, very different employees, very different scientists, very different students, and a world that is better equipped to outrun its problems.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Marie. I think you connect well to this crowd here, and we have a few questions. I think we're overstepping a little bit of time here. So Katharina Moser, please give us a shout how much time we still have left.
Yes, I think you're doing great. And again, I would love to listen to you guys for 2 more hours. I would say let's have 7 more minutes. And we do have some questions also from the audience. Do you want me to read them out to you, or you're good with that?
If you can start with one, we can go, back and forth. Katharina, start with the first one, Marie, please.
Yes, great. So we had Heike Christiane Vogel-Pösch again, and I'm just shortening her question a bit, which was basically, how can we innovate political system? I think that is also a crucial question. I think it's a big question, but I'm throwing it into your conversation.
Sure, that we can discuss it in the next 30 seconds and solve it. It's easy.
I also think that might be.
I'll take that question.
Markus?
If that is a question for the two of us, I don't know. But Marie, we have you here, so we your expertise. I'm sorry, I don't want to steal your time.
Sure. So in terms of democracy, I think what I'm seeing from the work that I do with social entrepreneurs, and many of them work on human rights or work on democracy or governance related issues. I think one of the key things that I'm learning from them is that one of the key levers is to think the role of societies, right? And I talked about this sort of provocatively before, that we live in this Fordist society where we delegate power. So how do we, change these systems by making sure that we include more voices, and that we get to sort of a more, let's say, direct way of people being able to make decisions about what concerns them. And you see that, that there's huge successes with many of the works of our social entrepreneurs, who not necessarily innovate the system per se, but who often build support structures around it in order, for example, to ensure that children have a better say in our world, which has become such a big topic with the climate crisis, that it's been the young generation that marched on the streets to get our sort of adult attention. But I think it's a topic for a whole symposium.
I agree, Marie, and sorry to put you on the spot here, but we would like to hear as much from your side as possible. I have a question by our colleague here in Vienna as well, Karin Dobinik. She asked, or she states, an system in which everyone has the skills and power to make decisions about everything, such as environmental regulation, infrastructure investment, technological change, etc. It's not a given that this will lead to a more sustainable and just society. The question still remains, who decides what the better solutions are? So who decides what the better solutions are? I know this is, again, a very abstract question. So maybe, Marie, you can help us to answer that from your background as Ashoka. I'm very sure that it's difficult for you to decide what project you want to help financing or want to give priority over others. So how do you deal with these questions of better solutions and give a preference to one project for one solution over another?
So actually, from the perspective of Ashoka, how we answer this question is that we're relatively agnostic regarding the solutions. And why do we do that is because we believe that no one of us can really know at any given point what the best solution is, right? It's very hard. The world is complex, it's interconnected, and we make mistakes. So how do we balance that out is, in the context of Ashoka, is by ensuring that we only bring people into our network and support people in our network who have a very clear motivation that's driven by this idea of the good of all, and who are 100% ethical in what they do, right? And actually, you'll meet one of our fabulous Ashoka Fellows later on, Bas van Adel, the founder of Fairphone, who's part of our network as a social entrepreneur. And he's a great example of these qualities. And what is it that, so how do we deal with that? Is that we say, if an idea to a pressing problem of this world is in the hands of a creative, leading entrepreneur who is fully focused on the good of all, then it's okay to have different types of solutions, sometimes even a bit contradictory, because none of us really know what's going to be the right solution, but we want to make sure that we have as many as possible at our hands so that the better solutions can win. And I think this is where, again, the issue of diversity comes in. This is why it's so important to reflect all the different experiences, because something that's a great solution for me, you know, as someone who lives, you know, in a beautiful city and, you know, comes from this sort of wonderful privileged context, may be a really shitty solution for somebody who doesn't. So how do we make sure that we have solutions for everyone, but that the solutions that benefit me don't necessarily end up, you know, and I'm, you know, there was a conversation about electric cars. You know, I mean, electric cars are great, you know, if you have a lot of money and you live in a city that, you know, doesn't have pedestrians. But other than that, they're also cars. And so, you know, they create a lot of waste. And, you know, in whose backyard do the batteries end up, right? So how do we make sure that we balance out, you know, these, you know, solutions? And we really honestly believe, in the context of our work at Ashoka, that the more people we have who create solutions, the more sure we can be that we'll be future-proof as societies.
Okay. Thank you very much, Marie. I think, Katharina, we are coming to an end here. I see that we have multiple questions, actually, but I think we have to come to an end. Is that right?
Yes, unfortunately, that's right.
In that case, Marie, thank you very much. Thank you also for, you know, educating us how to make a great solution. And I got it, you know, give it to the people who are truly passionate about it, well educated, and have the right mindset. So I would say just give it to Christoph Thierenstein, Tima Bansal, Günther Stahl, and Daniela Ortiz, and Milda Sinsegate for this conference, and they might heal the world. You can rely on them, certainly. Thank you very much, Marie Ringler. That was very helpful and educating. When I listen to people like you who have a proper job other than us academics, I realize how easy our life can be sometimes, and that you and not academia are solving the great question of the world. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much, Marie, for helping us to heal the world together. I think there couldn't have been a better ending for this. And also I think it was very beautiful, Marie, that you touched upon the bubble that we might find ourselves in quite often in these conversations that was mentioned in the chat quite often as well. And that sometimes it's really about finding several solutions who somehow we can work our way into the right ones. Thank you so much for this beautiful conversation to both of you.